I'm not really the sort of person to write ghost stories on the internet. I used to call myself a skeptic for most of my life, and for the most part, I still am. However, there's this one time that I saw something. I haven't really been able to shake it off of my mind. My girlfriend used to live in Bonn, Germany, a few years ago. Me, at the time living on the outskirts of Cologne, would often go visit her using the tram. Going all the way to the main train station to grab a regional train made no sense. It would end up taking longer. Anyways, we both were constantly making the journey through this route, which involves a whole bunch of open fields, some little towns here and there, and a large industrial sector, with some factories and whatnot. We would often see this huge, abandoned building through the window. It was located at the beginning of the industrial sector, right before the proper factories would come into view. The place was in an utmost state of decay. It had most of its windows shattered, broken, or straight up missing. Its painting was peeling away, revealing its ugly concrete foundations, and the sign of whichever corporation had owned the place was broken in two and faded to the point it was impossible to read. The miserable remains of what was once a factory of something. We'd never done any urban exploration at all before, but this factory was just magnetic. My girlfriend and I are huge horror enthusiasts. Despite being, as I said, mostly skeptic, we love to watch horror films, go to haunted houses, anything of the sort. I guess it has to do with the adrenaline it gives you, the tension that comes with letting yourself get immersed in that atmosphere. It was just too tempting. Besides, it raised so many questions, like why was it just left like that to rot? There were so many huge companies that would probably be eager to use the free spot. Hell, it was right in the beginning of an industrial sector. However, there it stood, like a decaying corpse, unwilling to let go of what it once was. After a few trips of just see it go by through the window, we decided to at least try to find out if there was a way in. A few days later, armed with water, dust masks, and 2 lanterns, we were getting out in the station the factory was closest to. Since it was located somewhere in the middle of the way, there was no tram station that'd be actually all that close, which meant we had to walk a bit. By the time we'd made it to the place, the winter sun was already starting to set. We hesitated. We'd purposely decided to get there when there'd still be some daylight outside. We didn't want to end up running into any hobos that might sleep there or try to explore the place in complete darkness. However, we really had miscalculated how long it would take us to actually walk from the station all the way to the place. We'd already made the trip though. It was not completely dark yet. I didn't want to have made it all the way there for nothing. Might as well take a peek, and if something went wrong, we'd make a run for it. My girlfriend was not completely happy with the idea, but in the end, she finally agreed. From up close, the factory was even more grim. All sorts of trash littered the floor around it, and some overgrown weeds sprouted from its sides. Its walls were covered with stains and peeling paint, obscured in some spots with graffiti. What struck me the most, though, was the silence. The factory stood a bit afar from the actual industrial sector, but just standing in front of it, I swear I couldn't even hear a bird chirping. The metal door, rusted and faded, didn't seem to have been opened in decades. Luckily, plenty of large broken windows stood right next to it. We shone our lanterns through. We only managed to see a wide, empty corridor stretching far into the darkness. I started getting some second thoughts this time, but my girlfriend took the initiative this time and climbed through the window. I followed suit. The floor right by the entrance was also covered in all sorts of trash, mixing in with the rubble and debris left behind by the slow decay of the place. Not a sound could be heard. We did a quick inspection of the surroundings. The walls were also covered in graffiti and some rusted railings hung from the high ceilings. Besides that, nothing. It struck me as kind of odd. The place seemed to be still pretty weatherproof, but there were no signs of someone actually spending the night there. Regardless, with no threats on sight, we decided we might as well dive a bit deeper. We walked along the wide, barren corridor. The atmosphere was haunting. Our lanterns were pretty cheap and weren't making a great job of providing visibility. The concrete floor had plenty of these big, deep scratches. At the time, I assumed they must have been from dragging heavy machinery. Now, I'm not so sure. After walking towards what had seemed the end of the corridor, we noticed something strange. The walls with the graffiti and the trash on the floor ran through the entire place up until here. Like literally, you could see the exact line that divided the dirty, desecrated floor and walls, and the spotless space that stretched forward. We were unsure if we should keep going. However, I could already feel that familiar tinge of adrenaline. Plus, the curiosity was just killing me. I insisted we keep going. I could see a door on the other side, and I wanted to at least have a look. The door was, surprisingly, open, and it revealed a smaller chamber on the other side. As soon as we stepped through, it all felt different. The air was stuffy. There were no windows across the place, which also meant complete and oppressive darkness. Our lanterns were barely making a difference. It wasn't only that, though. The place made my throat swell up. My head started slightly spinning. It all felt wrong. We roamed through the darkness. There were some things left behind in this room. Some old rusty machinery stood in the middle, surrounded by some debris and an old little wooden cart. Some plastic drapes barely hung from rusty railings. I tried to take out my phone to take some photos, but its battery was completely drained. I swear I had at least 80% left before going in. It was the same with my girlfriend's. Suddenly, this noise. This deep, droning sound coming from the far end of the room. I felt it inside of me, making my whole body vibrate. That was enough for my girlfriend. She tried to drag me out, but I wanted to see where it was coming from. She grabbed my hand, but I freed myself and kept going. I'm honestly running out of excuses. The truth is, I don't know what came over me. I just needed to see. She followed me begrudgingly. As we approached, the droning sound just grew stronger. I could feel it inside my body. My teeth began slightly rattling. I advanced, as my girlfriend kept trying to pull me backwards, and my lantern shone on something. A white round object had appeared at the other side of the room, seemingly out of nowhere. An identical one followed suit. I approached, trying to figure out what they were. A chill went down my spine, and a gasp got caught in my throat. Halfway there, I turned around and ran, dragging my girlfriend by the hand. The droning sound became stronger, and I swear I could feel the ground shaking. We ran through the whole factory and climbed out without looking back. We couldn't stop running until we were back at the tram station. We have no idea what the sound might have been. Neither of us has ever heard anything similar. It could have been one of the old machines. We don't know what we saw either. I talked to my girlfriend afterwards, and have done so once in a while for the past 2 years, and we still aren't sure what it was exactly. It may have just been the light from the flashlights bouncing on something. I guess it's possible. However, the moment I froze in the middle of the room and ran, I could swear they looked like eyes, huge eyes, staring at us directly from the darkness. The factory stands there to this day, but we haven't set foot there again, nor do we plan to. I'd rather keep my skepticism intact. Whatever may hide in there, if there's something actually in there at all, I don't need to know. Did you know there's an entire abandoned British military complex next to a remote little village in Germany? I had no idea either until last summer when a friend that lives nearby found out about it and decided we'd take a little field trip to try to find a way inside. I thought the whole abandoned military complex would be the most interesting thing to come out of it. However, there was something else. Something was very wrong with the place. See, when I say military complex, I guess most people would imagine a small base located in a strategic position, or something of the sort. This was a whole village. It had a school, small grocery stores here and there, a church, houses for the soldiers and their families to live in, and several other buildings I don't even really know what they used to be for. It was insanely huge. The craziest part, though, was why the place was abandoned. See, from what I remember my friend telling me, the British Army decided to abandon the place around 2013 because they deemed it not worthy to keep maintaining it and moved it somewhere else, or the German government made it illegal for them to still be stationed there, or something like that. It had supposedly been a very bureaucratic decision. However, inside everything seemed like it was left in a rush or something. It didn't really seem like they just chose to move to another place. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. I should just begin from when we first got inside. We managed to sneak in by climbing some chain-link fences on the side of the complex. Apparently, the place is still guarded by the government, which means you can't just go through the main gates. We had to drive all the way from Mönchengladbach when it was already dark, park the car in an empty spot like a kilometer away from the base, and walk all the way there as to not attract a lot of attention. Once we got in and walked away far enough from the entrance, the place was an absolute ghost town. We walked along the road until we got to the empty parking lot of a large rectangular building. For some reason, some lampposts here and there still had some energy running, and gave a little light in the otherwise complete darkness that engulfed the complex. We decided to get a bit closer and check the place out. The landscape was just eerie. The whole building, having been left exposed to almost 10 years of disrepair and impact of the elements, was beginning to get reclaimed by nature. Some overgrown bushes and trees covered many of the windows, and wild grass sprouted from cracks in the pavement. It looked post-apocalyptic. Looking at it gave me this weird feeling, as if, despite being built by humans, it no longer welcomed them inside it. We decided to go in nonetheless. Luckily, one of the doors had been left wide open. The light from the lampposts didn't quite reach all the way inside. A pitch-black corridor laid ahead of us. Luckily, my friend assumed something like this would happen and had brought some proper lanterns with him. After a mutual pep talk, we began moving forward. I immediately noticed the debris covering the floor. Some pieces of broken glass, dust, and small pieces of the collapsing ceiling, the sort of things you'd expect to find in a decaying building. We kept on walking, and the corridor opened to a sort of antechamber with several rooms on the sides. We immediately realized the place was a school. How? Well, everything was left behind. Like, the floor was littered with papers and folders and notebooks. The different rooms still had desks in them. Whiteboards were still hanging from the walls. Everything. I picked up one of the papers and saw it was a class schedule. Why did they leave it like this? If they just moved somewhere else or some boring reason, why would everything be just abandoned? I started getting a bit weirded out. Maybe there was a reason why this place was kept untouched. However, my friend's interest had just been piqued, which meant we were definitely going to give the place a closer look. I tried to tell him we should just get out, but he was already moving forward, resigned, and with no other way to drive home. I followed him. We got inside one of the classrooms. The desks and chairs all stood in one corner of the room, some knocked over and some standing up, as if they'd been haphazardly pushed out of the way. As we turned around to leave, we got a clear view of the whiteboard. A chill went through my whole body. Someone had written something on it. In another moment, down went Alice after it, never once considering how in the world she was to get out again. Ominous. The phrase is still burned in memory. Sure, Alice in Wonderland is a fairly innocent book, but why? What were they trying to say with it? A feeling of dread started slowly creeping on me. Maybe some other idiots like us had gotten inside and wrote it. It could be. It wasn't making me feel any safer, though. My friend was beginning to get a bit creeped out as well. He figured we'd explored enough, and we both walked out of the building. The silence was starting to get oppressing. The meager lampposts were barely making a difference in the darkness that engulfed the entire complex. I was getting very uneasy. I don't know how to exactly describe it, but I felt on edge. It's as if somehow the complex knew of our presence and it didn't want us roaming around. The place felt hostile, like a dormant beast waiting to pounce on us. I know my friend felt the same way. When we'd first gotten in, he was talkative and super into it. Now, he wasn't saying a single word. We walked on and on, far longer than what I remember walking before. Yet somehow, we were nowhere near the fences we climbed. At some point I stopped, telling my friend we were for sure lost. We looked around, but could only see the dark roads stretching in front and behind us, no end on sight. I started to get desperate. I blamed my friend for taking us the wrong way, but he assured me he'd followed the exact roads we come from. I could swear we did too. I guess I just needed someone to blame. We had no choice but to keep on walking. And so we did. It might have been hours. After a while, my sense of time and space were gone. The only thing that remained was the asphyxiating dread that clouded up my head, the never-ending road, and the decaying buildings we walked right past through. We carried on. Either we'd pass out, or we'd reach the border. At some point, we walked past one of the residential roads of the complex. We stopped for a bit, trying to catch a little break. We were both past our breaking point, desperate, afraid of never finding our way out. As we tried to calm each other down, I caught something on the corner of my eye. One of the houses had a light on. It filtered through the windows. Someone stood in front of one. A silhouette staring directly at us. It was so deeply unsettling. Its shape was human, but its energy, the way I could feel its deep hatred and contempt as it stared at us, that didn't feel human at all. My friend saw it too. Without thinking twice, we bolted. We ran until our lungs were about to collapse, and then had no choice but to return to walking. The sun began to slowly rise. We'd spent the entire night trying to find our way out. Suddenly, there it was, the fence through which we'd first entered. We ran straight to it. In a blink, we climbed over and were running down the street. Once we were getting far away enough, the guards of the main entrance spotted us and began screaming something. We never turned back. We made it to the car and disappeared. I don't know if they knew we'd been inside the complex. I'm not really sure what happened. In hindsight, we might have just gotten lost, and the creepy surroundings really got into our heads. But I don't know. That feeling of dread, of sheer hostility. I've never felt like that before. That place is strange. Something went seriously wrong, and that's why they left it to rot. It doesn't seem to be empty, though. Someone was watching us from one of the houses. Someone, or something, was left behind. Something better left alone. I grew up in a not-so-nice neighborhood. My family had fallen on some times back when I was very little, and to top it all off, my dad abandoned us not long after. My mom, despite working 2 jobs to support me and my brother, was unable to pay for the rent of the place we were living in. This meant we had no option but to relocate to a cheaper part of the city. The place was pretty rough. The entire neighborhood seemed to be in disrepair. There were cracks all over the roads, trash around the sidewalks. It was better to stay inside after a certain hour. Sometimes you'd even hear gunshots outside. It was better to stay away from anyone else's business. Despite all that, though, I remember that what scared me the most of the entire place was this house, not far away from mine, at the end of the block. It was huge. It must have been very fancy when it was first built. It'd been long abandoned, though, and was in a deep state of disrepair. Half of the roof had fallen apart and taken some of the sidewall with it, which left a strange, pointy shape. When I'd come back home from school in the winter, and the sun was already starting to set, I remember that, from a distance, I always thought its silhouette kinda looked like a wicked, smiling face, staring at me as I walked home. It gave me the chills. It was not just that, though. The place had bad energy, bad vibes. Everyone in the neighborhood avoided it, called it the Shrieking Manor, saying that when the wind flew through it, it'd make these sounds like shrieks. The point is, It was a scary place. Everyone could agree on that. And well, when you're a kid and you start hanging out with some of the other neighborhood kids, it's just a matter of time till someone decides the best way to spend the afternoon is go pay a visit to the Shrieking Manor. My mom used to come home very late from her shift at a restaurant, which meant that after 6 p.m. that she left the house. Me and my brother were absolutely forbidden from stepping foot outside without her knowledge. Usually we'd never dare to. She was not someone you wanted to mess with. However, our social standing with the other neighborhood kids was at stake. We knew we had to be there. So there we were, all of us scared to death, but forced to stay under the given assumption that whoever chickened out was a complete shit. Oh, and of course, to top it all off, we had to go when it was already dark. Else, it's just not scary enough. Such idiots, it's honestly a miracle we all made it home safe afterwards. Well, sort of, at least. There were 4 of us in total. Me, my brother, our friend Mike, and his friend Daniel, all staring at the blackened, pathetic remains of a once imposing building towering in front of us. The wind flew by, and making justice to its name, whistled through the broken boards. We first tried the door, but it was obviously locked. Seeing no other obvious way in, we decided we'd climb through the window, broken who knows how long ago. In we went and found ourselves in the foyer of the Shrieking Manor. It was not as dark as expected. The moonlight managed to get in through the collapsed roof. It was dark enough to not see anything properly, though. Luckily, Mike had thought this through a bit more than us and brought 2 lanterns for all to share. My brother and I got one, and Mike and Daniel kept the other one. The air was damp and musty, which was honestly to be expected. However, there was a faint hint of something foul, something rotten. It was faint enough to barely be noticeable, though. Mike, the mastermind of this entire operation, decided the best way to explore the entire place before our parents suspected anything was to split up. They'd go to the right, and we'd go to the left, and if anyone found something cool, they'd shout so the other group could come check it out. We all thought it sounded good, and off we went. My brother and I crossed the doorway to the left, into what seemed like a library/study room. When we got in, though, I was taken aback by how full the room was. I mean, the entire library was there. The bookshelves were still full. Sure, basically all the books were completely destroyed by the rain and the elements, and the bookshelves seemed like they wouldn't last much longer upright. In fact, some had already collapsed. It was still super interesting, regardless. All the big furniture was still there. Some old, musty rugs. The place had been left almost as it originally was. I wondered what happened to the owners. I asked my brother, but he said the only thing he'd heard is that people said they'd left the house once and just never returned. He wasn't sure if it was true, though. I began examining the bookshelves, but as I said, basically all of the books were destroyed. You'd grab them and they'd smush in your grass, or all the ink had run off. Plus, Henry wasn't really keen on me touching anything. He said it was better to leave this sort of places undisturbed. Anyways, we found nothing interesting enough to try and call the others, so went back to the foyer to wait for them. We found them there already. We all did a quick report of our findings. They'd gone inside of what used to be the dining room and the kitchen, and found out basically the same thing as us. Everything seemed to have been left behind by the owners. All the possibly valuable stuff was long gone, of course, but the big dining table and a pair of chairs were still there, as well as some rusty pans and broken plates in the kitchen. Once we'd updated each other, Mike said we should all go up the stairs together and check out a bit of the bedrooms. We all looked at each other, and I think we all were thinking the same. The second floor was way creepier. I might be misremembering. It was honestly so long ago, but looking upstairs, the darkness seemed heavier. I could barely see past the last step. However, Mike had already made the challenge. No one chickened out. As we went up, the foul smell returned. It got stronger, the closer to the bedrooms we got. I did mention it this time, but Mike insisted we at least find out where it's coming from. We made it to the second floor, which opened up to a hallway. The smell was really strong. It was almost making me gag. We looked around. Nothing interesting to see, only a dark hallway with some doors leading to different rooms. Only one of the doors was open, though. We all had more than enough. My brother told Mike we should just go back downstairs, but Mike had something to prove. He covered his nose with his shirt and went inside the room. Deeply annoyed, my brother followed him, along with Daniel. I really didn't want to go in. My head was spinning. I had chills running down my back. I knew there was gonna be nothing good inside. However, I didn't want to stay outside all by myself either. I finally followed. There was a corpse in the room. A putrid, half-rotting corpse of what I think was a woman laid on the floor, in the middle of a dark red circle drawn around her. Burnt black candles were placed on the sides, and some weird symbols had been also drawn with what I now think could have been blood. The stench was unbearable, and I ran straight outside the room, crying. Seeing this, my brother came straight after and took us directly home. Mike and Daniel stayed. We did end up telling our mom about it. She got really mad, grounded us for 2 weeks, but never called the cops. I guess she was afraid of them asking too many questions. It was a shady neighborhood after all. People in our situation don't feel really safe with the cops. When we finally were able to meet our friends again, we saw Daniel, but not Mike. We asked about him, said he didn't know why he wasn't coming out anymore, but he hadn't seen him in some time. We asked what happened inside. He told us Mike had touched the body. He wanted to show he wasn't scared. We never saw Mike again. Not alive, at least. He got very sick a few days after our little trip and didn't make it. Let's make something clear. I'm not saying he got cursed or something. Could have been a disease the corpse had, or something completely unrelated. However, my entire life, I'm never getting remotely close to fucked up stuff like that again. Better not risk it.